They thought Kendrick Lamar was pulling up to the Grammys to win awards. Nobody knew he was about to start a fashion war. The carpet was calm, predictable, safe. Celebrities doing what celebrities do: pose, smile, keep it moving. Then Kendrick's car door opened, and in less than 10 seconds, the entire red carpet energy flipped upside down. Cameras stopped flashing for everyone else, because Kendrick stepped out wearing Chanel. Not inspired by, not styled like, not paying homage. Actual, custom, unreleased Chanel that insiders say was never cleared, never announced, and never meant to be seen on him, or possibly on any man, that night. You could literally see the confusion on people's faces behind the barricades. Fashion editors squinting, stylists grabbing their phones, PR reps whispering with that tight smile that means something is very, very wrong. Fans are shocked, because this wasn't a fit, this was a statement. And the wild part? Kendrick walked like he knew exactly what storm he had just started. No grin, no explanation, no interviews. Just a slow, calm walk past hundreds of cameras, while, behind the scenes, Chanel executives were reportedly trying to figure out how their most guarded design ended up on the most unpredictable artist in music. Sources say texts started flying before Kendrick even hit the step and repeat. Who approved this? Is this real? Why didn't we know? Because according to insiders, this piece was part of a private archive collection not scheduled to be seen for months. Some are even claiming it was reserved for a global ambassador reveal that never happened. And Kendrick wore it first, in front of the entire world. That's when the blogs lit up. Fashion Twitter exploded. Rap pages went crazy. Everyone asking the same question at the same time. Did Kendrick just break one of Chanel's most unspoken rules on live television? The moment Kendrick Lamar hit that carpet, something invisible cracked in the room. You could see it in the way people stopped pretending to be casual. Stylists who had been smiling for cameras were now whispering behind their hands. Publicists who never break composure suddenly had their phones glued to their ears. Fashion editors leaned forward like they were trying to solve a mystery in real time. Because what Kendrick was wearing wasn't just expensive, wasn't just rare, it was wrong in a way that didn't make sense. And the craziest part, Kendrick looked completely calm. No extra posing, no big grin, no look at me energy. He walked like he always walks, quiet, reserved, almost uninterested in the chaos forming behind him. But behind that calm walk, a storm was building so fast that people on the carpet started noticing something nobody expected to notice at an award show. Panic. Not fan excitement, not celebrity hype. Industry panic. Reporters started texting editors instead of asking questions. One fashion correspondent was overheard saying, "This is not cleared. This is not cleared at all." And that's when the phrase started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Chanel didn't approve this. Because in luxury fashion, nothing happens by accident. Every button, every stitch, every appearance is negotiated, documented, approved weeks in advance. Brands know exactly who is wearing what before the world ever sees it. That's how control works at that level. But this felt like control had just slipped through someone's fingers. Sources say a Chanel rep who was present at the event went completely silent after Kendrick walked past. No smiles, no greeting, just eyes locked on the outfit like they were trying to understand how it existed in that moment. And according to insiders, texts started flying to Paris before Kendrick even made it halfway down the carpet. Is this ours? Did we loan this? Who authorized this? Because the piece Kendrick was wearing wasn't from any recent runway. It wasn't from any campaign. It wasn't from anything publicly announced. Fashion historians online started zooming into photos within minutes and realized something wild. This design resembled a modified archive silhouette that had never been released publicly in modern form. And that's when the internet went crazy. Fans are shocked, but fashion insiders were stunned. Because if this was real Chanel, and it hadn't been cleared, that meant Kendrick didn't just wear a look. He accessed something almost no artist ever gets access to: the private vault of a luxury house known for guarding its legacy like a secret code. And he wore it to the Grammys like it was nothing. Meanwhile, his team was quiet. No explanations, no statements. His stylist didn't post anything. No brand tags, no designer shoutouts. Just photos spreading like wildfire across social media with captions asking, "How did he get this?" That silence made it louder. Because usually, when a celebrity pulls off a major fashion moment, their team celebrates it online instantly. But Kendrick's camp? Radio silence. Which made people start asking an even crazier question. Was this a statement? Because Kendrick Lamar is not new to symbolism. He doesn't do things randomly. Every move is layered. Every appearance says something without him ever speaking. And the more people looked at the outfit, the more it felt intentional. The tailoring was sharp but rebellious. The classic Chanel structure was there, but it was twisted just enough to feel like it had been reinterpreted. Almost like someone had taken the DNA of the brand and reshaped it through Kendrick's lens. That's when a fashion blogger tweeted something that made the situation explode. This looks like Kendrick didn't ask Chanel for permission. It looks like he asked Chanel for history. And that tweet went viral in minutes. Because it captured exactly what everyone was feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't brand placement. This wasn't endorsement. This felt like Kendrick stepping into a space that luxury fashion rarely allows hip-hop artists to occupy without heavy control. And he did it on the biggest music night in the world. Behind the scenes, the tension reportedly got thicker. One insider claims a Chanel affiliate was heard saying, "This is going to be a conversation tomorrow." Not tonight, tomorrow. Because in that moment, nobody wanted to create a scene. But everyone knew something had happened that couldn't be undone. And while all this was happening, Kendrick kept walking. Calm, silent, unbothered. He stopped for photos, turned slightly for the cameras, and in that moment, photographers realized this was bigger than they thought. They weren't just capturing a celebrity outfit. They were documenting a moment that fashion would be talking about for years. Because Chanel has rules, unspoken ones, especially when it comes to who wears what and how it's presented. The brand is known for tight image control, carefully curated ambassadors, carefully selected moments, and Kendrick's appearance didn't feel curated. It felt disruptive. By the time he reached the entrance, social media had already done what it does best. Side-by-side comparisons, archive references, zoom-ins on fabric patterns, people asking whether this was a reworked piece from a decades-old design that had never left storage. And then came the real twist. A former fashion assistant posted anonymously claiming that a piece matching Kendrick's description had been requested months ago by a music client under strict confidentiality. No public fitting, no press, no documentation allowed. And the request allegedly came with one condition: no announcement from the brand. That's when people realized this might not have been Chanel being blindsided. This might have been Kendrick moving in a way Chanel couldn't control publicly. And that idea shook the fashion world even more. Because if true, that means Kendrick didn't break into the house. He walked in through the front door quietly and waited for the world to notice on his terms. Fans are shocked because this doesn't look like fashion. It looks like strategy. And as Kendrick disappeared inside the venue, the carpet never really recovered. Other celebrities walked, posed, smiled, but the energy was different now. Everyone was talking about the same thing. Not the awards, not the performances. Kendrick, Chanel, and what just happened. Because this wasn't loud. This was precise. And the more people thought about it, the more they realized this wasn't just a look that went viral. This was a move that exposed how power works in luxury fashion and how Kendrick just played the game without saying a single word. Inside the venue, the tension didn't go away. It followed Kendrick like a shadow. Because while the audience at home was still trying to figure out what they were looking at through screenshots and reposts, the people inside the Grammys were already reacting in real time. Celebrities were leaning across tables. Stylists were whispering over champagne glasses. You could literally see heads turning every time Kendrick walked past, not to greet him, to look at the outfit again. One artist was overheard saying, "That's Chanel, right?" And the reply came back, "Yeah, but it's not supposed to be." That sentence right there is what made this moment different from every other fashion moment in Grammys history. Because normally, when someone wears Chanel, it's celebrated, tagged, announced, public. This felt secret, like something you weren't supposed to see yet. Like Kendrick had shown up wearing a spoiler from the future of fashion without asking if it was time. And the craziest part, nobody from his team was explaining anything. No stylist posts, no designer credits, no "Thank you Chanel" caption, nothing, which only made the mystery louder. At one point, a camera cut to Kendrick seated in the audience, and for a split second, you could see two people a few rows back staring at him instead of the stage. Phones out, zooming in, sending photos to someone, not fans, industry people. Because the more they looked at the stitching, the more they realized something deeper. This wasn't a current collection. This wasn't a replica. This wasn't custom, inspired by Chanel. This was archival energy. And in luxury fashion, archival pieces are treated like museum artifacts. They don't leave the vault. They don't get loaned casually. They are protected like history itself. Which is why the whispers started shifting from "how did he get this?" to "who let him get this?" And that's when the alleged behind-the-scenes story started leaking through industry circles. Rumors began spreading that Kendrick's team had been in quiet talks with Chanel months ago, but not for a brand deal, not for an ambassador role, for access. Pure access. Access to history. Access to pieces that represent the brand before it became the global machine it is now. And allegedly, the request came with an unusual clause: no promotional attachment, no social media rollout, no press statement, just the garment. If that's true, it means Kendrick didn't want Chanel's spotlight. He wanted Chanel's legacy. That difference is huge, because celebrities usually want the brand. Kendrick wanted the story behind the brand, and by wearing it without announcement, he forced the world to talk about Chanel in a way Chanel didn't script. That's what made executives uncomfortable, because this wasn't marketing. This was disruption wrapped in elegance. Meanwhile, fans online were going wild. Fashion pages were doing deep dives. Rap blogs were calling it the most disrespectful, respectful move in fashion history. One tweet with over 200,000 likes read, "Kendrick didn't wear Chanel. He wore Chanel without asking for permission to make it a moment." And that line stuck, because that's exactly what this felt like. Then came another twist. A well-known stylist posted a cryptic Instagram story that said, "Some archives are meant to stay archived," with no context. People connected it instantly. Screenshots spread. Speculation exploded. Was this shade? Was this frustration? Was this confirmation that what Kendrick wore wasn't meant to be seen publicly? Fans are shocked because this was starting to feel less like a fashion win and more like a silent chess move. Inside the venue, Kendrick stayed exactly the same. Calm, reserved, almost detached from the noise. He spoke to a few artists, laughed quietly at his table, and never once addressed the outfit. That silence became part of the drama, because every time someone asked him about it, he smiled and changed the subject. No explanation, no confirmation, nothing, which is classic Kendrick. He lets the world build the story while he watches. And the longer the night went on, the more uncomfortable it became for people who realized this was bigger than the Grammys. This was about control, about who gets to define how luxury interacts with hip-hop culture. Because for years, brands have carefully curated how rappers wear their pieces. Approved looks, approved images, approved narratives. But Kendrick flipped that dynamic. He showed up with something so rare, so unexpected, that the brand had no time to frame it. They had to react. And reacting is something luxury houses hate doing. By the time the awards show cut to commercial breaks, group chats across the fashion industry were on fire. People asking if this was a mistake, a power move, or a quiet agreement gone public too soon. And then another rumor dropped that made things even wilder. Someone claimed that this exact piece had been scheduled for a major reveal later in the year, with a global ambassador campaign attached. Meaning Kendrick might have just debuted something before Chanel ever planned to. Whether that's true or not didn't matter anymore. The idea was enough to fuel the fire. Because now it felt like Kendrick didn't just wear history. He jumped the timeline. Fans started saying, he didn't break fashion rules, he broke fashion timing. And that phrase started trending. Because timing is everything in luxury. And Kendrick stole the moment before it officially existed. As the night went on, you could feel the narrative shifting from shock to admiration. Even people who didn't understand fashion started realizing something important had happened. This wasn't about clothes. This was about presence. About how an artist can step into a room and change the entire conversation without saying a word. By the time Kendrick left the venue, the outfit had already become the biggest story of the night. Not the winners, not the performances, the outfit. And somewhere in Paris, according to insiders, phones were still ringing. because this wasn't a red carpet moment that would fade after a day. This was a moment that exposed how powerful silence, intention, and history can be when they collide in front of the entire world. By the next morning, this wasn't a Grammys story anymore. It was a fashion industry emergency meeting. Because while fans were still reposting photos and arguing in comment sections, people inside luxury fashion were trying to understand how one artist managed to hijack the narrative of an entire brand without posting a single caption. Fashion blogs weren't calling it a look anymore. They were calling it the Kendrick incident. That's when things really started to spiral. A respected fashion archivist posted a thread breaking down the silhouette Kendrick wore, comparing it to pieces from decades ago that were never reproduced for modern collections. The thread ended with a line that shook people. If this is authentic, someone opened a vault that hasn't been opened in years. And that's when speculation turned into obsession. Because now the question wasn't just how Kendrick got the piece. It was who trusted him enough to give it. Insiders started hinting that this wasn't a standard stylist pull. This wasn't a PR loan. This was a private viewing. The kind reserved for royalty, legacy clients, and people the brand considers culturally untouchable. Which raised another wild thought. What if Chanel didn't see Kendrick as a celebrity wearing their clothes, but as a historical figure worthy of touching their history? That idea flipped the whole narrative, because suddenly this was Kendrick sneaking into fashion. This was fashion quietly acknowledging Kendrick. And if that's true, it explains the silence from both sides. No statements, no confirmations, no denials. Just a global conversation happening without either party feeding it. Meanwhile, fans are shocked at how deep this is getting. Rap pages are talking about fashion archives. Fashion pages are talking about hip-hop symbolism. Two worlds that rarely overlap this intensely are now dissecting the same moment from different angles. And then came the twist nobody saw coming. A former employee from a luxury house commented anonymously on a forum saying, "When brands allow archive access, it's because they believe the person represents something bigger than trend. It's about legacy alignment." Legacy alignment? That phrase spread like wildfire, because if you apply that to Kendrick, it starts to make scary sense. Kendrick has always positioned himself as more than a rapper, more than an entertainer. He moves like a cultural historian, someone aware of the weight of art, symbolism, and timing. So what if this wasn't him borrowing Chanel? What if this was Chanel trusting Kendrick with something sacred? That possibility made the situation feel less like a mistake and more like a secret agreement the public was never supposed to fully understand. And the more people thought about it, the more the night started to look different. Kendrick didn't pose excessively on the carpet. He didn't stop for long interviews. He didn't explain the outfit. He just let it be seen, like an exhibit, like he was walking through a museum and we were all watching from the outside. That's when people realized something subtle but powerful. He never treated it like fashion. He treated it like art. And art isn't explained, it's observed. That's why this moment feels so unsettling to the industry. Because it can't be packaged into a campaign. It can't be summarized into a caption. It just exists, and the world is forced to interpret it. Meanwhile, stylists and designers began quietly debating online. Some praised the boldness. Others questioned whether archive pieces should ever be worn publicly. One comment that gained traction read, "This is either the most respectful thing Kendrick could have done with Chanel history or the most rebellious." And nobody could agree which one it was, which is exactly why it kept trending. Because the uncertainty is the story. By midday, major fashion publications were drafting think pieces, not about who Kendrick wore, but about what it meant. About how hip-hop has moved from being dressed by luxury to now interacting with luxury on equal cultural footing. And Kendrick was the example. Not because he said anything, but because he didn't. That silence is what's driving everyone crazy. People want an explanation so badly, but the lack of one is what makes this legendary. Because the more people talk, the bigger the moment becomes without Kendrick lifting a finger. And somewhere in that chaos, another rumor started floating that made everything feel even deeper. Someone claimed that Kendrick specifically requested that no modern Chanel logos be visible on the outfit, that he wanted the piece to speak for itself without branding. If true, that means he wasn't trying to promote Chanel. He was trying to honor Chanel's origin. which is something brands rarely get from celebrities. Most want visibility. Kendrick wanted authenticity. That difference is why this feels like history instead of hype. By the end of the day, one thing was clear. This wasn't about breaking fashion rules. This was about redefining how artists and luxury houses interact when both sides recognize each other as cultural institutions, not marketing tools. And Kendrick did it without a single interview, post, or explanation. Just presence. By the second night, the conversation had moved from speculation to something that felt almost mythical. People weren't asking if the outfit was real anymore. They were asking what it meant that it was real. Because at this point, too many fashion experts had weighed in. Too many archive references had matched. Too many insiders had spoken carefully without saying too much. The conclusion everyone was circling was the same. Kendrick didn't fake this. He accessed something very, very rare. And the silence from Chanel was starting to feel louder than any statement they could have released. Normally, when a brand gets this level of attention, they jump in fast. They repost. They confirm. They shape the narrative before it runs away from them. But this time, nothing. No acknowledgement, no denial, just stillness. And that stillness made people think even deeper. Because if Chanel was upset, they would have corrected the story. If Chanel was thrilled, they would have celebrated it. So what does it mean when they do neither? It means this moment exists in a gray area that luxury brands almost never allow. A space where art, control, legacy, and culture collide in a way that can't be neatly packaged. And Kendrick is sitting right in the middle of it without saying a word. Meanwhile, fans are shocked at how this keeps unfolding like layers of a movie. Rap pages are now talking about fashion philosophy. Fashion influencers are quoting Kendrick lyrics. It's like two industries that never fully understood each other are suddenly speaking the same language because of one outfit. That's when another detail surfaced that made everything feel intentional. A photographer who shot Kendrick that night mentioned in an interview that Kendrick asked for very specific angles. Not flashy ones, not dramatic ones. Clean, straight-on shots that showed the structure of the garment clearly. Like he wanted people to study it, not just admire it. That small detail changed everything. Because it suggested Kendrick knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want this to be a red carpet flex. He wanted this documented like evidence. Evidence of something bigger than fashion. Evidence of presence. Evidence of access. And that's when the phrase started circulating online. Kendrick didn't wear Chanel for style. He wore it for statement. That line stuck because it felt true. This wasn't about looking good. Kendrick always looks composed. This was about showing something that normally stays hidden. Bringing a piece of fashion history into the public eye for one night and then walking away without explanation. Almost like he borrowed it from the past and returned it quietly. And the deeper people went into this story, the more it started to feel like Kendrick had turned the Grammys into an art exhibit without anyone realizing it at the time. Because think about it. He didn't promote it. He didn't brag about it. He didn't even acknowledge it. He just let the world discover it slowly. That's not how celebrity fashion works. That's how museum pieces work. And suddenly, people began to understand why this felt so unsettling to the industry. Because Kendrick didn't follow the script. He didn't let the brand control the narrative. He didn't even try to control it himself. He let curiosity do the work. That's a level of confidence most artists don't have. And that's why this moment feels historic instead of viral. Meanwhile, stylists across the industry started having very uncomfortable conversations. Because if Kendrick can access archives and present them this way, what does that mean for how brands will handle future artists? Will they become more protective, more selective, or more open to cultural figures who move like Kendrick? Because one thing is clear now. Kendrick didn't approach Chanel like a customer. He approached Chanel like a curator. And that's a position very few people ever get to stand in. By now, the story had spread beyond music and fashion. Cultural commentators were weighing in, saying this moment represents something bigger, the point where hip-hop isn't just invited into luxury spaces, but trusted with their history. That's huge, because for decades, rappers have worn luxury as a symbol of success. Kendrick wore luxury like a symbol of understanding. And that difference is what has everyone talking days later. Even people who don't care about clothes can feel that something meaningful happened. Because the way Kendrick handled it feels intentional, respectful, and quietly rebellious all at once. And nobody can quite explain how he pulled that off. That mystery is what keeps this trending, because the more you try to explain it, the more layers you find. And the wildest part? Kendrick has still said nothing. No interviews, no captions, no confirmation, just silence, which forces the world to keep talking without him. That's power. So now the question is sitting with you, not just what Kendrick wore, but what Kendrick did, because this wasn't a red carpet moment you scroll past. This was a moment that made the entire fashion world pause, the entire music world lean in, and the internet collectively ask, did we just witness history without realizing it at first? Fans are shocked. Stylists are still debating. Fashion insiders are speaking in careful sentences. And Kendrick, still silent. That silence is what makes this legendary, because while everyone else is trying to explain it, Kendrick already moved on. And that's the part that hits the hardest. He didn't chase the moment. He created it and walked away. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think this was a calculated fashion power move, a quiet collaboration, or Kendrick stepping into a space luxury brands never expected an artist to step into? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is bigger than music and bigger than fashion. It's about culture, legacy, and who really controls the narrative when art, history, and influence collide. If this breakdown opened your eyes to something you didn't notice on Grammys night, hit that like button. If you love deep dives into moments the mainstream misses, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like this don't come with press releases. They come with clues. And we're here to decode every single one. Clues. And we're here to decode every single one.